Most people don't realize this, but the way you experience your life is not determined by what happens to you. It is determined by the meaning you assign to what happens. Two people can face the same crisis, the same loss, the same uncertainty. One breaks. The other becomes sharper, calmer, almost untouchable. The difference is not intelligence, it is not luck, and it is definitely not motivation. The difference is an internal operating system. More than 2,000 years ago, long before social media, before modern psychology, before neuroscience had language for stress and cognition, a group of thinkers quietly mapped the architecture of the human mind. They did it not from comfort, but from chaos, from war, from exile, from slavery, from political pressure that would crush most people today. They were the Stoics, and they were not interested in abstract philosophy. They were interested in one thing only: how to live well when life refuses to cooperate. If you stay with this until the end, you will not just understand Stoicism intellectually, you will feel it rewire the way you interpret pressure, fear, ambition, relationships, and time itself. Because Stoicism is not about becoming emotionless, it is about becoming unbreakable. And the first principle changes everything. The Stoics began with a brutal, liberating truth. Most of what upsets you is outside your control. Epictetus, who began life as a slave and ended it as one of the most influential teachers in Roman history, opened his teachings with a sentence so simple it feels obvious, until you realize how rarely you live by it. Some things are up to us. Some things are not. Your opinions, judgments, desires, and actions belong to you. Traffic, weather, other people's behavior, the economy, public opinion, none of these do. Most people live as if this line does not exist. They emotionally invest in outcomes they cannot command, then wonder why they feel constantly tense, resentful, or exhausted. Think about how often your mood depends on something external: a message not returned, a headline, a comment from someone who barely knows you, a delay you didn't plan for. The Stoics saw this as a form of mental slavery. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man on earth at the time, ruling an empire under constant threat of war and plague, reminded himself daily that peace does not come from controlling events, but from mastering perception. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This is not passive acceptance. It is strategic focus. When you stop wasting emotional energy on what you cannot change, you reclaim that energy for what you can. Your response, your values, your next action. Modern psychology would later rediscover this under different names: locus of control, cognitive reframing, emotional regulation. But the Stoics were practicing it centuries earlier, not in labs, but in real life under extreme pressure. Imagine the difference between waking up each day asking, how do I control the world versus how do I show up today regardless of the world? One leads to frustration, the other leads to freedom. This principle alone can reduce anxiety dramatically, not because life becomes easier, but because your mind stops fighting reality. And once you stop fighting reality, something unexpected happens. Obstacles stop feeling like enemies. They start feeling like material. Marcus Aurelius wrote a sentence that has echoed through centuries of leadership, psychology, and military strategy. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is not poetic optimism. It is a mental algorithm. Every obstacle contains information. Every resistance reveals a weakness or a skill yet to be developed. Most people experience obstacles as insults. Why is this happening to me? Why now? Why again? The Stoic experiences obstacles as instruction. Seneca, who lived under the constant threat of execution in the court of Nero, understood that comfort weakens the soul, while difficulty sharpens it. He warned that a life without challenge produces fragile people, confident only when conditions are perfect. Think about modern life. We optimize for convenience. We avoid discomfort. We curate stability. And then we are shocked when uncertainty overwhelms us. The Stoics trained the opposite way. They prepared for adversity before it arrived. When rejection comes, the untrained mind collapses into self-doubt. The trained mind asks, "What is this refining?" When plans fail, the untrained mind panics. The trained mind adapts. This is why Stoicism is not a philosophy of avoidance, but of engagement. You do not wait for ideal conditions. You become the kind of person who functions under any conditions. This reframing changes how you experience failure. Failure stops being a verdict. It becomes feedback. A job rejection is no longer a judgment of your worth. It is data. A conflict is no longer a threat to your identity. It is an opportunity to practice restraint, clarity, and courage. This does not mean pretending pain doesn't exist. It means refusing to let pain be wasted. And once you stop wasting pain, you stop wasting time. Which brings us to one of the most misunderstood Stoic principles, presence. The Stoics were obsessed with time, not productivity, but awareness. Marcus Aurelius warned himself not to live as if he had infinite tomorrows. Seneca wrote an entire essay on how most people are not short on time, but careless with it. They understood something modern culture struggles to accept. Life is not happening later. It is happening now. Most anxiety lives in imagined futures. Most regret lives in remembered pasts. The present moment, by comparison, is almost always manageable. When you focus fully on what is in front of you, this conversation, this task, this breath, the nervous system calms. Attention sharpens. Meaning returns. This is not escapism. It is precision. To live in the present does not mean ignoring the future. It means refusing to sacrifice the only moment you actually inhabit. Seneca described anxiety as interest paid on suffering before it is due. The Stoic solution is not denial, but discipline of attention. Where your attention goes, your life goes. And attention, like any muscle, can be trained. This is why self-discipline sits at the center of Stoic ethics. Not discipline imposed from outside, but discipline chosen from within. Marcus Aurelius did not remind himself to be disciplined because he lacked power. He reminded himself because power without self-mastery is chaos. Self-discipline is not about rigid control. It is about alignment. Aligning your actions with your values. Aligning your short-term impulses with your long-term vision. The Stoics believed freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. It is the ability not to be controlled by what you want. Desire unchecked becomes dependence. Dependence becomes weakness. This is why they practiced voluntary discomfort, cold, hunger, simplicity. Not because suffering is noble, but because resilience is built through exposure. When you prove to yourself that you can endure less, you are no longer afraid of losing more. This is the foundation of emotional resilience. Emotions to the Stoics were not enemies, they were signals. Anger, fear, envy, these arise automatically. But what you do next is a choice. Epictetus taught that emotions come from judgments. Change the judgment, and the emotion follows. This is not suppression, it is investigation. Why am I angry? What belief is being threatened? Is that belief accurate? By slowing the reaction, you create space. In that space lives freedom. Modern neuroscience would later confirm this, that pausing between stimulus and response engages higher cognitive functions and reduces emotional hijacking. The Stoics discovered it through observation and practice, and nothing clarifies priorities like the final principle we will fully explore later, the awareness of mortality. Memento mori. Remember, you will die. Not as a threat, as a lens. When you remember that time is finite, trivial anxieties lose their grip. Petty conflicts shrink. What matters becomes obvious. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that he could leave life at any moment, not to depress himself, but to awaken himself. If today were enough, how would you live it? This awareness does not darken life. It intensifies it. It makes gratitude possible. It makes courage rational. It makes procrastination absurd. And it prepares the ground for everything that follows. Because Stoicism is not about knowing these ideas. It is about becoming the kind of person who lives them when it counts. This is only the beginning. If there is one habit that quietly separates emotionally strong people from those who are constantly overwhelmed, it is this: They have learned how to work with their emotions instead of being ruled by them. The Stoics never believed emotions were mistakes. They believed unexamined emotions were dangerous. Fear, anger, desire, envy, these arise naturally. You do not choose the first spark. What you choose is whether you feed the fire. Seneca warned that anger, when left unchecked, becomes a temporary madness, not because anger is evil, but because it narrows perception. When you are angry, you stop seeing reality clearly. You react to a distorted version of events, filtered through wounded pride or fear of loss. Emotional resilience begins with a pause. That pause is not weakness, it is power. Epictetus taught that between an event and your reaction lies a judgment. Change the judgment, and the emotional outcome changes with it. This is why Stoicism is deeply practical. It does not tell you to feel differently. It teaches you how to think more accurately. Imagine someone criticizes you publicly. The immediate sensation is heat. The mind wants to defend, retaliate, explain. The Stoic asks a different question. Is this within my control? Is this opinion objectively true? Does reacting improve my character? Often, the answer is no. By refusing to react impulsively, you deny the situation the power to define you. Emotional resilience is not about becoming numb. It is about becoming selective. Not every feeling deserves obedience. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that external insults only harm us if we agree with them. If the criticism is valid, it is instruction. If it is false, it is noise. This reframing is psychologically liberating. You stop outsourcing your self-worth to the reactions of others. In modern American culture, where identity is often tied to visibility, reputation, and constant feedback, this principle is radical. It creates internal stability in an unstable environment. And stability changes how you relate to adversity. Most people believe resilience means bouncing back. Stoics believed resilience meant becoming harder to disturb in the first place. This is where voluntary hardship enters again. Seneca advised periodically living as if you had lost everything. Eating simple food, wearing modest clothes, reminding yourself that you could survive with far less than you think. Why? Because fear is fed by imagination. Exposure starves it. When you experience discomfort by choice, you remove its mystery. You learn that you are capable of more than your mind suggests. This has profound implications for modern anxiety. Anxiety thrives in avoidance. Confidence grows in confrontation. By leaning into controlled discomfort, physical training, honest conversations, discipline in habits, you expand your tolerance for uncertainty. This is not self-punishment, it is self-training. self-trust. And self-trust transforms how you experience time. One of the Stoics' greatest insights was that most people live as if time were infinite, then panic when it proves otherwise. Seneca wrote that people guard their money carefully, yet waste time freely, the one resource that can never be replaced. Living in the present is not about mindfulness as a trend. It is about respect for life. When you stop mentally living in a hypothetical future, you reclaim clarity. Decisions improve. Attention deepens. Relationships become more authentic. You listen more fully. You speak more honestly. You act more deliberately. This is why Stoicism pairs presence with purpose. The present moment is not meant to be drifted through. It is meant to be inhabited, and inhabited with values. The Stoics believed that a good life is not defined by pleasure, wealth, or fame, but by excellence of character. Aristotle called this eudaimonia, flourishing through virtue. The Stoics refined it further. Virtue to them was not moral perfection, it was consistency. Doing the right thing when it is inconvenient. Choosing integrity when no one is watching. Responding with restraint when retaliation is easier. Marcus Aurelius warned against wasting time debating what a good person should be. Be one. This is deeply relevant in a culture saturated with opinions, outrage, and performative morality. Stoicism shifts the focus inward. What are you practicing daily? What habits are shaping you quietly? Because character is not built in dramatic moments. It is built in ordinary decisions repeated over time. This is where gratitude enters, not as positivity, but as clarity. The Stoics did not practice gratitude to feel better. They practiced it to see better. Gratitude trains perception to notice what is already sufficient. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily of simple gifts: breath, reason, companionship, the ability to choose virtue. When you recognize how little you truly need to live well, desire loses its grip. Comparison fades. Contentment becomes possible. In modern consumer culture, dissatisfaction is engineered. Stoicism acts as an antidote. You stop measuring life by accumulation. You start measuring it by alignment. Gratitude does not deny ambition. It stabilizes it. You pursue goals without attaching your identity to outcomes. This prepares you for one of the most confronting Stoic practices: memento mori. Remember, you will die. Not someday, at an unknown moment. The Stoics did not use this thought to induce fear. They used it to strip illusions. When you remember that time is finite, urgency becomes intelligent. You stop postponing what matters. You stop tolerating what erodes you. Marcus Aurelius wrote as if death were always near, not because he was obsessed with it, but because he respected life. If this were your last year, what would you stop doing? What would you start saying? Who would you stop avoiding? Memento mori clarifies priorities faster than any productivity system. It exposes how often we trade life for distractions, and it brings us back to the final core of Stoicism: service. The Stoics believed humans are social creatures. You are not here only for yourself. Excellence is incomplete without contribution. You cultivate discipline not to dominate others, but to serve them better. You develop resilience not to withdraw from life, but to engage with it more fully. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that what benefits the hive benefits the bee. This counters modern hyper-individualism. Stoicism teaches strength with responsibility. You are not responsible for controlling others. You are responsible for how you affect them. This is where Stoicism becomes not just a philosophy, but a moral framework for leadership, relationships, and citizenship. Calm under pressure, clarity under uncertainty, integrity under temptation. These are not abstract ideals. They are daily practices, and they compound. Over time, people trust you more. You trust yourself more. Life becomes less chaotic, not because it is easier, but because you are better equipped. And yet, the Stoics warned against pride. Progress is private. Virtue does not announce itself. You do the work because it is right, not because it is seen. This humility protects you from the final trap, believing you are finished. Stoicism is not a destination, it is a discipline, a lifelong practice of refining perception, action, and intention. You will fail. You will react poorly. You will forget. And then you return, again and again. This is how strength is built. In the final part, we will weave all these principles together into a unified framework for modern life: relationships, work, fear, ambition, and meaning. And we will close with a reflection that invites not applause, but participation. Because wisdom unused is weight. Wisdom lived is freedom. At some point in life, almost everyone asks the same quiet question. Why does it feel like I'm doing everything right, yet still feel unsettled? You have goals, you work hard, you try to improve yourself, and yet something feels fragile, as if one unexpected event could knock everything off balance. The Stoics understood this tension well. They saw that most people build their sense of stability on things that cannot hold weight: status, recognition, success, approval. All of these can disappear without warning. So the Stoics asked a different question. What can I build that cannot be taken from me? Their answer was character. Not reputation, not achievement, not external validation. Character is the only possession that grows under pressure. This is why Stoicism places such emphasis on internal standards rather than external outcomes. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that if he acted with justice, self-control, and reason, the outcome was irrelevant. The action itself was the reward. This runs directly against modern conditioning. In American culture, success is often measured by visibility. If it's not seen, it doesn't count. If it's not praised, it feels empty. Stoicism quietly dismantles this belief. It teaches that peace comes from knowing you did the right thing, not from being told you did. This shift changes how you approach work. Instead of obsessing over results you can't fully control, market conditions, algorithms, opinions, you focus on craftsmanship, doing the task well, showing up prepared, acting with integrity. When your self-worth is tied to effort rather than outcome, failure loses its sting. A project fails, but your discipline remains. A promotion doesn't come, but your character strengthens. Recognition is delayed, but your values stay intact. This does not make you passive. It makes you durable. Durability is the hidden advantage in a volatile world. The Stoics lived in an era of political instability, sudden exile, and unpredictable violence. They learned quickly that the illusion of permanence is dangerous. Everything external is on loan: health, wealth, relationships, even time. Once you accept this, you stop clinging, and when you stop clinging, fear loosens its grip. Fear to the Stoics was not an enemy to be defeated. It was a signal that attachment had exceeded reason. What are you afraid of losing, and why does losing it feel like losing yourself? Epictetus taught that suffering begins when we confuse what we have with who we are. You are not your job. You are not your reputation. You are not your possessions. These are roles and tools, not identities. This insight is liberating, but also demanding, because once you stop hiding behind external labels, you are forced to confront who you are without them. This is where many people retreat. It is easier to chase achievement than to cultivate wisdom, easier to accumulate than to reflect, easier to stay busy than to stay honest. The Stoics refused this escape. They practiced daily self-examination. Seneca recommended reviewing each day in the evening, asking 3 simple questions. What did I do well? What did I do poorly? What can I improve tomorrow? Not with guilt, with precision. This practice builds self-awareness without self-loathing. You stop being surprised by your own behavior. You start recognizing patterns, and patterns, once seen, can be changed. This is how the Stoics approached self-improvement, not through grand resolutions, but through quiet consistency. Modern culture glorifies transformation. Stoicism values refinement. Small improvements, repeated daily, compound into strength. This applies directly to relationships. Most conflicts are not caused by malice, but by unmet expectations and unexamined assumptions. The Stoics taught radical responsibility for perception. When someone disappoints you, ask, did I expect them to be different than they are? Did I project my values onto their behavior? Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that people act according to their understanding of good and bad. Expecting otherwise is unreasonable. This does not excuse harmful behavior. It contextualizes it. You can set boundaries without hatred. You can walk away without resentment. Stoicism teaches firmness without bitterness. This is especially powerful in a polarized society. When identity becomes fused with opinion, disagreement feels like an attack. The Stoic remains grounded. You are allowed to disagree without being disturbed. You are allowed to hold your values without demanding universal agreement. Inner stability creates outer calm, and calm is magnetic. People trust those who do not overreact. Follow those who remain steady under pressure. Respect those who act consistently. This is why Stoicism has quietly influenced leaders, generals, entrepreneurs, and athletes for centuries. Not because it promises comfort, but because it builds composure. Composure is not indifference, it is readiness. The Stoics trained themselves mentally for loss, illness, and death, not to obsess over them, but to reduce shock. Seneca warns that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. By rehearsing adversity mentally, you reduce its power. If it happens, you are prepared. If it doesn't, you are grateful. This practice, negative visualization, is not pessimism. It is appreciation sharpened by awareness. When you realize how easily things could be lost, you value them more deeply. Gratitude stops being sentimental. It becomes grounded. This mindset reshapes ambition. You still pursue excellence. You still strive. But you are no longer desperate. Desperation signals dependence. Dependence invites anxiety. The Stoic pursues goals without attaching self-worth to their attainment. You aim high. You act fully. You accept whatever follows. This balance is rare and powerful. It allows you to take risks without fear of identity collapse. Failure becomes survivable. Success becomes grounded. Neither defines you. And then, inevitably, the question of meaning arises. What is all this for? The Stoics did not believe meaning was something to be discovered externally. It was something to be enacted. Meaning emerges through alignment with nature, not wilderness, but human nature. To live rationally, to act justly, to contribute to the whole. Marcus Aurelius believed each person has a role to play, like a limb in a body. Meaning comes from fulfilling that role with excellence. You may not control the stage, but you control how you perform. This removes existential paralysis. You stop asking, "What is the point of life?" and start asking, "What is required of me now?" This question cuts through confusion. What is the most reasonable action in this moment? What aligns with my values? What serves something larger than my ego? When you live this way, life feels coherent. Not easy, not painless, but coherent. And coherence is deeply satisfying. It quiets the constant background anxiety that something is missing. Because nothing essential is postponed. You are living it. This brings us closer to the Stoic understanding of happiness. Happiness to them was not pleasure. It was tranquility, a stable joy that comes from inner order. Not excitement, not constant positivity, but the absence of inner conflict. You stop fighting reality. You stop fighting yourself. You still feel emotion. You still experience loss. But you are no longer at war with existence. This is the peace the Stoics promised, not as a gift, but as a consequence of disciplined living. And it is available to anyone willing to practice, not perfectly, not immediately, but sincerely. In the final part, we will bring everything together into a unified closing and end with an invitation that respects the intelligence of the audience, honors the depth of the material, and asks for participation not as a transaction, but as a shared pursuit of wisdom. There comes a moment when philosophy stops being something you consume and becomes something that consumes you. Not emotionally, ethically. The Stoics believed wisdom is proven only in action. If your philosophy does not change how you behave under pressure, it is decoration, not transformation. This is why Stoicism is relentlessly practical. It asks, how do you act when no one is watching? How do you respond when circumstances are unfair? How do you carry yourself when you have power and when you don't? Marcus Aurelius did not write for an audience. He wrote reminders to himself, notes meant to be lived, not admired. This alone tells us something important. Stoicism is not performative. It is private. You do not practice virtue to be seen as virtuous. You practice it because it is the correct way to live. In modern culture, identity is often externalized. People ask, how am I perceived? How do I compare? How am I positioned? The Stoics asked something far more demanding. Am I acting in accordance with reason? Reason to the Stoics was not cold logic. It was clarity, the ability to see situations without distortion from fear, ego, or desire. Most suffering, they believed, comes not from events, but from false judgments about events. This is why Stoicism is deeply connected to truth. Not personal truth, not emotional truth attached to preference, but objective truth. What is actually happening? What part of this is under my control? What response preserves my character? These questions create psychological distance, not detachment from life, but distance from reactivity. When you stop reacting, you start choosing. Choice is where dignity lives. Even in extreme conditions, the Stoics believed dignity is always available. Epictetus, once enslaved, taught that no one can enslave your mind without your consent. Your body may be restrained, your circumstances limited, but your judgment remains free. This idea unsettles modern assumptions. We often believe freedom requires options. The Stoics believed freedom requires discipline. Discipline of thought, discipline of desire, discipline of response. Without discipline, options become distractions. With discipline, even limitation becomes navigable. This is why Stoicism thrives under pressure. Pressure reveals priorities. Pressure exposes weak values. Pressure clarifies who you actually are. The Stoics did not avoid pressure, they trained for it. They used adversity as a proving ground. When illness came, they practiced patience. When insult came, restraint. When loss came, gratitude for what had been given at all. This is not emotional denial. It is emotional intelligence, to feel without being ruled, to care without clinging, to love without possession. Stoicism teaches a form of love that is rare today. Love rooted in appreciation, not ownership. You value people deeply and accept their impermanence. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that everyone he loved would one day die, including himself. This did not make him cold, it made him attentive. When you know moments are finite, you show up differently. You listen more fully. You forgive more readily. You waste less time on trivial conflicts. Memento mori sharpens love. It also sharpens courage. If death is inevitable, then fear loses leverage. What exactly are you protecting by playing small? What are you postponing that will not wait forever? The Stoics believed courage is not recklessness. It is alignment with reason despite fear. Fear does not disappear. It is deprioritized. This reframing is critical in modern life, where fear is constantly stimulated by media, markets, comparisons, and imagined futures. Stoicism acts as a stabilizer. You stop asking, "What if this goes wrong?" and start asking, "What is the honorable action, regardless of outcome?" This is leadership, not positional, but moral. You lead yourself first, and self-leadership transforms ambition. Ambition without philosophy becomes hunger without end. No achievement satisfies for long. No milestone provides lasting peace. The Stoics saw this clearly. They did not reject ambition. They redefined success. Success is not getting what you want. It is wanting what is worth wanting. Virtue is always worth wanting, because it is always available. You may not control results, but you always control effort, honesty, and restraint. This realization is deeply grounding. It frees you from the tyranny of comparison. Someone will always be richer, more visible, more praised, but no one can outdo you at being you, acting rightly in your circumstances. This makes envy irrational. Why resent someone for advantages you were never meant to have? The Stoic focuses inward, not from insecurity, but from clarity. You play your role well. You let others play theirs. This is how peace emerges, not by avoiding difference, but by accepting diversity of paths. And then there is the question of legacy. What remains after you? The Stoics did not believe in legacy as fame. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that even the greatest names fade into obscurity. Legacy to them was impact. Did you act justly? Did you improve the people around you? Did you leave situations better than you found them? These are quiet legacies, often invisible, but deeply consequential. A calm presence in chaos, a fair decision under pressure, a moment of restraint that prevents harm. These shape lives in ways statistics never capture. This reframing removes the desperation to be remembered. You focus instead on being useful now. This is the Stoic cure for existential anxiety. You do not need to be extraordinary. You need to be excellent where you are. This brings us back to the core. Stoicism is not about controlling life. It is about cooperating with reality. Reality does not negotiate. It responds to competence. The more clearly you see, the more skillfully you act. And clarity comes from practice. Daily reflection, voluntary discipline, attention to what is within your control. This is not glamorous. It is effective. Over time, something subtle changes. You stop being surprised by hardship. You stop being consumed by praise. You stop being destabilized by criticism. Your emotional center of gravity moves inward. And once it does, life becomes less reactive and more intentional. You still feel joy. You still feel grief. But neither owns you. This is inner freedom, and inner freedom is rare. In the final part, we will close this journey by drawing a single, coherent thread through everything you've heard. And we will end with an invitation that is not a demand, not a manipulation, but a respectful request to those who recognize that wisdom is only valuable when it is shared, discussed, and lived. If there is one illusion Stoicism quietly dismantles, it is the idea that peace is something you arrive at. Peace is not a destination. It is a byproduct, a consequence of living in alignment with reality. Most people spend their lives chasing relief from stress, from fear, from uncertainty, believing that once external conditions improve, inner calm will follow. The Stoics reversed this logic. They understood that external conditions are unstable by nature. Empires rise and fall. Markets fluctuate. Bodies age. Relationships change. Waiting for stability outside yourself is a strategy that guarantees disappointment. So they asked a different question. How do I become stable regardless of conditions? Everything you've heard so far points to the same answer. You train your perception, your judgment, and your character. Not once, not occasionally, daily. Stoicism is not a collection of quotes. It is a discipline of attention. Attention to what is real. Attention to what matters. Attention to what is yours to govern. This is why Stoicism feels timeless. It does not promise happiness as an emotional high. It offers tranquility as an inner order. A life where your thoughts are not constantly at war with reality, where your emotions inform you but do not command you, where your values guide your actions even when it costs you. This is not an easy path. The Stoics never claimed it was. They claimed it was worth it, because the alternative is a life spent reacting to headlines, to opinions, to impulses, to fear, never fully present, never fully grounded. Stoicism offers something rarer than comfort. It offers self-command. When you practice focusing only on what you control, you stop bleeding energy into resentment. When you embrace obstacles as training, you stop seeing life as hostile. When you live in the present, you stop postponing meaning. When you cultivate discipline, you stop negotiating with weakness. When you develop emotional resilience, you stop being hijacked by every feeling. When you remember your mortality, you stop wasting time. When you practice gratitude, you stop confusing abundance with excess. When you pursue excellence of character, you stop outsourcing your worth. And when you accept your role in something larger than yourself, you stop feeling isolated in your struggles. This is not theory. This is a way of moving through the world. Imagine waking up without the quiet panic that something is wrong. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are prepared. Prepared to adapt, prepared to endure, prepared to act with dignity. Imagine disagreements that do not escalate into identity threats, criticism that does not shatter your self-respect, uncertainty that sharpens your focus instead of paralyzing you. This is what Stoicism trains, not invulnerability, clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations while leading armies, facing betrayal, disease, and the weight of responsibility few people will ever experience. And yet his writing is calm, measured, humble. Why? Because he was not trying to control the world. He was trying to control himself. This is the quiet power of Stoicism. It does not make you louder. It makes you steadier. And steadiness is contagious. In families, in workplaces, in friendships, in leadership. People feel safe around those who are not ruled by impulse. They trust those who do not overreact. They follow those whose actions are consistent with their words. This is how Stoicism shapes not only individuals, but cultures, one person at a time. You may never call yourself a Stoic. You do not need to. The Stoics themselves warned against labels. What matters is practice. How you respond when plans fail. How you treat people who cannot benefit you. How you behave when no one is watching. How you speak to yourself in moments of difficulty. This is where philosophy becomes real. And this is where the responsibility shifts to you. Because understanding these ideas is not enough. Wisdom unused becomes weight. It sits in the mind, admired but inert. Wisdom lived becomes structure. It changes how you breathe under pressure, how you pause before reacting, how you choose what deserves your concern. If something in this resonated with you, not emotionally, but intellectually, then you already know this is not entertainment. It is an invitation to live with more intention, with more courage, with more restraint, with more depth. And invitations like this are not meant to be consumed alone. If this reflection was valuable to you, consider staying connected, not out of habit, but out of alignment. Subscribing is not about numbers. It is about continuing a conversation that rewards thought, not outrage. If you believe this kind of long-form, serious exploration deserves more space online, a simple like quietly tells the algorithm that depth still matters. And if there is one person in your life, a friend, a partner, someone thoughtful, who would genuinely enjoy discussing these ideas with you, share this with them, not to convince, to reflect together. Finally, if you have the time, leave a comment, not to praise, but to contribute, a thought, a disagreement, an insight this stirred in you. Those are the conversations worth having. Because Stoicism was never meant to be admired from a distance. It was meant to be practiced, imperfectly, consistently, honestly, by people who understand that the quality of their inner life determines the quality of everything else. Thank you for thinking deeply. And remember, you do not control how long you live, but you do control how well.